So there's this new government regulation about to hit the world's biggest electric car market. And really, it's going to act as a kind of great filter, a test that, honestly, a lot of companies are going to fail. But there's one company that seems perfectly set up not just to survive, but to completely dominate. It could end up creating a government-backed monopoly. Let's break down how this is all going to happen.
And look, this isn't some far-off, maybe-it'll-happen thing. The clock is ticking, and it's ticking loud. The big date is January 1st, 2026. That's it. That is the mandatory enforcement day. It's real, it's not up for debate, and it is coming up fast.
At the very heart of this great filter is just one number, 11%. The source material we're looking at calls this the 11% squeeze. And what it is a really painful, mandatory tightening of efficiency standards. Now, you might hear 11% and think, that's not so bad. But in the world of car engineering, where everything is already super optimized, trying to find an extra 11%, that is a gigantic task.
Okay, so how does this whole thing work? Well, today we're going to piece this puzzle together. First, we'll get into the 11% squeeze itself. Then we're going to uncover this sort of weight-based trap that's hidden inside the law. After that, we'll look at NIO's secret weapon and how they basically engineered for this from day one. And finally, you'll see exactly why this is being called the Great EV Filter.
All right, first up, the 11% squeeze. The core of this is a brand new regulation, code GB 36980.1/2025. And the most important word here is mandatory. These are not suggestions anymore. If you want to sell an electric car in China after the deadline, you have to comply. So if your car just barely passed the old standard, you now have less than 2 years to somehow find 11% more efficiency, probably without jacking up your prices. It is a brutal, brutal ultimatum.
But what really makes this whole thing so potent isn't just the number, it's the mechanism. This is where we find what's being called the weight-based trap, a system that is specifically designed to punish heavy and, inefficient engineering. And this slide really nails the core concept, weight-based caps. It's basically physics meeting public policy. The idea is actually pretty simple. The heavier your car is, the stricter the efficiency rules get. It creates a direct line between how much a car weighs and how big of a headache the regulations are going to be. So, what does that actually look like? Well, if you build a small, lightweight, little compact EV, your efficiency target is pretty easy to hit. But if you build a massive 2-ton luxury SUV, you have to be dramatically more efficient just to pass the test. The law is quite literally rigged against heavy cars.
And what's so fascinating is the why behind all this. The source we're using puts it perfectly. The regulator is targeting what it calls lazy engineering. They're basically trying to criminalize those clunky, low-effort EV conversions that are just built on old, heavy steel platforms. It's a direct shot at inefficiency.
So here's the bottom line. What do these other car companies actually have to hit? Well, for a typical EV that weighs around 4,400 pounds, your average sedan or midsize SUV, the new hard limit is the equivalent of 139 miles per gallon. Now, just to put that in perspective, most of the popular luxury EVs out there today are somewhere in the 110 to 120 range. This is a massive jump. If your car can't hit this number, it fails. Full stop. It becomes illegal to sell.
And this right here brings us to the central mystery, NIO. They're known for making big, heavy, luxury SUVs. So how on earth are they actually favored by a rule that's designed to punish heavy cars? This is where we find NIO's secret weapon. And it has everything to do with their very unique business model.
So let's just ask the question directly. How does a company that makes heavy vehicles win a game that is fundamentally rigged against them? Well, the answer is a kind of regulatory hack, one that's been built into the foundation of their company from the very beginning. The whole key is something called Battery as a Service, or BAS. See, instead of buying a car with a battery permanently stuck inside it, NIO owners buy the car, but they subscribe to the battery separately. They use these amazing automated swap stations to pop out a dead battery and pop in a full one in just a few minutes. And here's the absolute crucial part. The customer does not own the battery pack. That little detail is the key to this whole thing.
Okay, so here's the trick. Here's how they game the system. When NIO goes to get its vehicles officially certified, they put their smallest, lightest 75 kilowatt-hour battery in the car. That weight then becomes the car's official certification weight. And because that weight is so low, the car gets dropped into a much less restrictive category, making those tough efficiency rules way, way easier to pass. And when you compare them side by side, It's just crystal clear. A competitor who wants to sell a long-range version of their SUV has to get it certified with that massive, heavy battery permanently installed. They're stuck with that weight on paper, and it shoves them into the hardest possible category. But NIO? They get compliance with the light, easy-to-pass battery, but their customers can still go to a swap station and get a huge 150 kilowatt-hour battery for over 600 miles of range whenever they want.
But here's the kicker. It's not just some clever paperwork trick. This advantage they have is actually backed up by some seriously advanced engineering. Turns out, NIO's platforms were already compliant with these 2026 rules years ago, all because they made some really expensive tech choices from day one.
First, let's just look at their inverters. NIO uses advanced silicon carbide, or SiC, inverters. Think of it like this. The older tech a lot of their rivals use is like an old incandescent light bulb that gets super hot and wastes most of its energy as heat. NIO's SiC tech, though, is like a modern, cool-to-the-touch LED bulb. It is just way more efficient, and it cuts down on that waste heat, giving them those crucial percentage points they need to hit that 139 mpge target.
The second thing is just basic physics, aerodynamics. How easily the car slips through the air. You can have the best powertrain in the world, but if your car is shaped like a brick, you're just throwing energy away. The NIO ET7 sedan has a world-class drag coefficient of 0.208. To give you some context, anything under 0.25 is considered excellent. So this number, this is elite. This isn't just for looks, it's engineered compliance.
So, when you combine the lighter certified weight from their business model with their superior hardware, you get a situation that is absolutely damning for the competition. This is the great EV filter in action, and it is about to force a massive consolidation in the market.
So who gets knocked out? Well, this law is basically a death sentence for a few types of vehicles. First, those old compliance cars, gas platforms that were just converted to be EVs. They're done. Second, cheap budget EVs that cut corners on things like how they cool their batteries. And finally, any legacy platform that just can't squeeze out that extra 11% efficiency. For all of them, January 1st, 2026 is basically D. And this chart just lays out the financial gut punch perfectly. For the rivals who want to stay in the game, they're facing a terrible choice. They have to spend billions, not millions, we're talking billions, to completely redesign their cars just to meet a standard that NIO already meets today. And what's the required spending for NIO to become compliant? Zero, not a single dollar.
What this all boils down to is that a government mandate, one that looks like a necessary efficiency standard, has become the ultimate weapon for the one company that built its entire system around swappable batteries from the very beginning. They are cashing in on their foresight, and they're about to grab a whole lot of market share as their rivals are either banned from sale or crippled by the cost of redesigning everything.
Which leaves us with one last question. Is this a masterclass in strategic foresight? A company that saw the future and built for it years ahead of time? Or is it just the clever exploitation of a loophole in the rules that the government never saw coming? The answer is probably a little bit of both. And that's what makes this such a fascinating story of strategy, engineering, and maybe a little bit of luck.